Well, let's get to the details of the story now. It's a story very well known to Christians. Call it the 10 plagues of the Bible. I'm referring to Exodus 12:12, where there were warnings that all the gods of Egypt would be judged through the 10th and final plague. Quote, on the same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals, and I will bring judgment on all of the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. Well, that is God speaking to persuade the Pharaoh to release the ill-treated Israelites from slavery. Here's what followed. Water turned into wine, frogs invasion, lice, balls, locusts, etc. Well, the Quran also shares a similar story, and it may not be exactly the same, but the Agri Ministry is taking the latest pest invasion in Ghana very seriously. They want Parliament to declare it a national emergency. They're also asking for extra funding to begin a comprehensive battle against the armyworms. Today we'll look at the extent of the invasion and a strategy to deal with it. First, let's get a background to the latest outbreak. Joseph Opoku-Gakpo has been following this keenly, and he joins me here in the studio. Also with me is Anthony Morrison. Anthony Morrison is with the Ghana Chamber of Agribusiness Executive. You're welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Gakpo, let's start with the background.
So it's something that the first bit of it is that it's virtually an annual occurrence. The outbreak that we are speaking of currently are in two folds. There is the fall armyworm, and then there's the African armyworm. The fall armyworm and the African armyworm. The African armyworm, they are pests that are quite common, within the African sub-region, and so virtually on a yearly basis we see infestations of that. Although the farmers have indicated that this year they've seen an increased situation of the infestation. The other bit has to do with the fall armyworms, and this is something that up until sometime around December last year, we hadn't seen it in Africa before. The fall armyworms, we are told, are native to the South American areas, and so that's where they've been doing some destruction over the years. It's only sometime in December last year that we saw a situation of them invading Zambia, and then we saw them, moving to other parts of Africa. They are now in South Africa, Tanzania, and a number of other countries are battling to bring the attacks of those pests under control. The Food and Agriculture Organization has been coordinating the efforts to deal with that, and then until recently, now we are being told that even with the fall armyworms, we've had, in fact, their infestation right here in Ghana beyond what we've been seeing over the years, which is the African armyworms.
Let me engage you, Mr. Morrison, on this matter. In the interim, what can government do? I mean, beyond declaring it as a state of emergency, what can government do to, so to speak, sort the farmers out?
Well, just before coming to the studio, we got the information that the Agri Extension officers have been sent out to go and help distressed farmers. Okay. But immediately, what requires doing is the farmers need support.
What kind of support?
They need, first of all, the pesticides.
Okay.
They need assistance as to how to use it. I mean, the correct measure and everything needs to be done. But most importantly, it has to be done in a holistic manner. You can't do it in fraction because the worms are moving. When you cease to curtail the first group, they move to the next one. Okay. So it requires a holistic action.
So this is something that spreads really fast.
Very. 3 days, they can finish about maybe 10, 20 acreage.
Wow.
Yeah.
How are farmers who have been affected with this coping so far?
Well, we have been on the field over the weekend, and we are not only seeing this in the grains and cereals, we've also seen a couple of them with vegetables as well and other crops. Just as my good friend here have said, this is the first time we are seeing some of these, the foreign breeds here in Africa.
Okay.
So how to contain them is really have to be a strategic move. Now, that also calls to question the form of strategic collaboration between FAO and their Ghanaian counterparts. Because CNN and BBC have said about this about 3 weeks ago.
Okay, they spoke about this, or they did stories about this about 3 weeks ago?
No, they spoke about this being in Southern and Eastern African countries 3 weeks ago. So with that, what time did this move from Southern Africa to Eastern Africa to West Africa? We should have seen a kind of harmonization. Okay. I mean, we should see what is the strategic move between the agriculture experts and organizations. Because cereals and grains are food security crops.
Right.
And we can't just allow ourselves to sit down and just see these armyworms take over our industry.
Gafo, let me have you respond to that. Yeah.
So what we're seeing on the screen, you know, on the cocoa fields, I'm told are actually the African armyworm. So they are green in color to a certain extent.
Okay.
And looks like the farmers are quite familiar with this. I've been speaking to some farmers in the Joso Joabeng, Asante Achim areas in the Ashanti region, and they will usually make the point that, okay, so we saw this last year.
Yes.
We tried to deal with it. You know, we weren't able to deal with it holistically, and then we are seeing it again this year. This is the more common one. When you look at the fall armyworms, yes, they look a little different, kind of dull yellow, kind of brownish. And with that, the indication is that it's very, very difficult to control them with the available pests that we have in the system.
Okay.
You know, virtually on a yearly basis, this is something that the Agric Ministry would usually prepare for. So they expect that something like this would come up.
But do we have any information as to whether the ministry is prepared for this?
It doesn't look so, because I've been doing some checks. Usually, they would have stocks of chemicals in a warehouse in Kumasi.
Okay. And then distribute.
And then like, around this time, then it will be released into the system. In fact, I'm told that for the last 3 or 4 years or so, we've not had some of those stocks of chemicals being in place to help deal with the situation as and when they emerge. And so usually mobilization in order to deal with the problem has to be done in Accra, you know, even after the information has gotten to them. That's what they've done over the last 3 or 4 years, which is what, you know, a lot of the players in the industry are also concerned about, that if we are really trying to deal with this, usually the warehouses in Kumasi stock chemicals that they would use to target the northern parts of the country, you know, the Brongahafu area and, you know, other areas within northern Ghana. And unfortunately, the impression I'm getting is that this time around we aren't exactly prepared, except that looks like it's now that the rainy season is beginning. When you do the checks, the indication is that we have the situation in the Brongahafu region, we have it in the Ashanti region, the eastern region, particularly in the upper east, upper west and northern region. We've not seen the invasion because they haven't started planting yet. You know, they are still waiting for the rains. So the areas where they've seen rains and have begun planting,
those are the areas
that are being affected. And so it looks like a little less limited this time around, at least to start with, until we mobilize fully and expect even more devastation going forward.
He was speaking about government and its collaboration with the FAO, for instance, because like you mentioned, the BBC had done a story about it. If for nothing at all, we should have an idea. We should have had an idea how this will perhaps travel. Do we have any indications as to the level of cooperation between the two organizations?
In fact, the hints of it started sometime back in January this year when you look through the wires from areas like Zambia, from Tanzania, from Zimbabwe. The indication is that that's when they saw the outbreaks. In fact, in the case of Zambia, there was the indication that the president had directed that the armed forces should step out there and help deal with the situation. Well, the necessary collaboration is obviously needed. We've not seen a lot of that yet. In fact, with regards to the letter from the Agric Ministry to Cabinet asking for an emergency situation around this, we understand that letter was actually put together and dispatched sometime 2 weeks ago. And the indication again is that a technical document that spells out how extension officers should help farmers deal with this has also been prepared at the level of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture here in Accra and dispatched. Everyone is looking up to the Food and Agri organization, except that even with them, a lot of what we see are technical expertise being dispatched. So a lot of knowledge sharing, a lot of conferences and trainings. In fact, there was one recently in Zimbabwe to discuss how to approach this holistically, looking at it as a sub-regional problem. But in terms of real things like getting the chemicals out there to help deal with it is something that maybe it may take a while for government to mobilize those and put out.
Well, I'm sure you'd agree that this shouldn't have taken government unawares, but it appears from all the analysis that we're doing here that it has. But what is the level of engagement between the Chamber of Agribusiness, for instance, and the Ministry of Agriculture? Is there anything like that so that it can solve this problem as quickly as possible?
Well, you agree with me that the major people facing this are the farmers.
Right.
So, and also the long bureaucratic system of working with the ministry makes it difficult to approach the ministry at this point in time rather than to engage directly the farmers. Now, coming back to what you were saying, in the northern part of Ghana, they do have the unimodal system of farming.
What's that?
They farm once in a year.
Okay.
I mean, and in the southern sector, they do the bimodal.
Okay.
So actually, yes, of course, those in the northern sector wouldn't have the effect. But you see, when you look at the history of armyworms and the way they come in, they come in when the rainfall delays and when planting has been done. So we were expecting that the ministry would have followed the rainfall pattern and knows that no, the way the rain have delayed planting, if you cast your mind back, the rain fell for some time continuously and it delayed and it stopped. Then planting took place and the rain went off before coming back again. So the ministry should have looked at the rainfall pattern to be able to determine that no, the way this is going, there is a likelihood of this. So they should have been well prepared.
Well, last year, the same thing happened, right? And it was almost about the same time.
No, it wasn't as rampant as it is now.
Yes, but it did happen.
It did.
So the point you make about knowing the pattern, at least if for nothing at all, it happened just last year. So what is it that, I mean, are we getting any explanations so far from the Agric Ministry?
It's looking interesting. With regards to the fall armyworms, that's clearly we couldn't have anticipated, as a situation from what we saw sometime last year. That obviously we couldn't have anticipated. Clearly, with regards to the African armyworms, which we've been dealing with over the years, usually it's the same firefighting approach that we've seen. So, we see the infestation happening and then farmers complaining and then we see officials moving to help deal with it. And so then it becomes kind of tricky. In fact, even in Southern America with the fall armyworms, the concern is that they've had a lot of difficulty getting chemicals that can really help control this. And so last week you were having a conversation about GMOs. The indication is that in that part of the world, the GMO seeds have been engineered that can automatically and have built-in defense for
resistance against these worms.
We don't have those kinds of things in Ghana, and which then would force us to then want to resort to the use of the pesticides to help deal with this. But education is important, which is how come I'm very much excited about the indication that we've seen a situation where a technical document on how to deal with this is being dispatched to the various ministries. The expectation is that they will really follow it to the latter as much as possible because the farmers are worried. We've seen these things destroying maize. We've seen it. You saw the cocoa bit on the screen.
It looks it looks disgusting. Actually.
Exactly. Concerns about soya bean, concerns about even potato and a few other crops that and the reality is that this is something that chews on not just maybe the fruits. It's attacking the leaves. It's attacking the stalk. It's attacking the flowers of the crops. Massive devastation.
Right. What are your own expectations, Mr. Morrison, of how government should deal with this moving forward?
Well, moving forward, it's all about providing logistics to the extension officers we have across the country. It's very important.
What kind of logistics?
First of all, they need
their
First of all, they need their motorbikes to be and fuel to be able to reach out to their farming communities, to be able to first of all identify this before they even happen, which under normal situations is not done because by the time the extension officers get there, the issue is already at stake, and they only have to go and mitigate. So there is no pre-prevention procedures. Now, this also calls in for the fact that we are rolling out Planting for Food and Jobs. So I just want to chip this in.
Okay.
With this actually 500 acreage of farmlands being wiped away, we need to double the expectation, the budget for the Planting for Food and Jobs.
Really?
Yes, because there is a likelihood that we're going to have glut in the system if this is affecting the three major food baskets of the country: Brongahafo, Ashanti region, Eastern region, maize, and thereof. When you take their food basket, it takes about 60% of what the rest of the country produces. So we have to be very circumspect with our strategy now. Increase the cultivation for the maize, sorghum, and the vegetables and what have you. We need to double it so that we'll be able to mitigate against the fallout.
As we plan for jobs. In the meantime, let me just take you through these graphics, just a bit of information, and I'll have you respond to that. And that deals with how far the disease, the infestation has spread, and it also talks about the cases that we've had and in which regions those cases have been recorded. The latest outbreak, we understand, was in December 2016, and the main source, like you mentioned, Gapo, I believe, was Zambia. So in Ghana, we're looking at the Brongahafo region, the Eastern region, and the Western region, as you mentioned, Mr. Morrison. These are the places that we seem to get most of our food from, so that becomes a very problematic area to be infested. The extent of spread, we're looking at 10 countries: Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Tanzania, South Africa, included, and these are not very far away from us, which is sort of some sort of explanation to the reason why we're having it here. The variant, that's Gapo, you mentioned that the African army and the fall army worms, and the fall army worms are the most destructive. Let me take your final words. Let me start with you, Mr. Morrison.
Well, the chamber have been some time now pushing for an insurance system for farmers.
Okay.
We believe that if a very good biodata could be built on our Ghanaian farmers and giving them insurance and pension system, I mean, when issues like this happen, this could cushion the poor farmer a little bit. They wouldn't be distressed. We know some of them have, fallen sick out of this, and 1 or 2 issues of death, which we are yet to ascertain. But if the government can look at for something maybe within the VAT, maybe 0.2%.
You want us to be taxed?
Yes, the fact. Look, we all eat food. Even the dress you wear is part of the agriculture. You understand? So we need to be strategic as a country. Let's come together as a country and ask ourselves, does rising food affect the family? Yes, it does. Does it affect cost of transportation? Yes, it does. Because everything of our life permeates food. If food is there, I mean, crime reduces. You go to school and you learn very well. I mean, the professionals work well.
Okay.
The police work well.
All right.
So let's look at a way of introducing an insurance package, a pension package for the poor farmer in the village, so that they will do their work, farm organically, so that we will enjoy our food.
All right. Gapo, your final words. Make it brief.
Going forward, a holistic plan is needed.
Right.
The concerns are that some of these things are exacerbated by climate change and its impact on agriculture and everything. And so we should pull brakes on the firefighting approach, and it happens every year. And then we go fight it and look at a more, long-term, well-planned response to some of these issues. And prevention is better than cure. That's where you should probably start from.
If I leave Gapo, he'll go on and on and on, but I won't leave him. Joseph Opoku Gapo is our parliamentary correspondent, but he's also on the environment and technology desk.
You got it right.
Good. I knew I got it right. And also here in the studio with me has been Anthony Morrison. Anthony Morrison is president of the Ghana Chamber of Agribusiness. Thank you very much for coming and for adding your thoughts to this program. Well,